Hello, my name is Elizabeth Rago, or as my students call me, Madam Rago. This video is going to be highlighting some of the key psychological concepts used in my French 1 Unit 1 lesson plans. So if you'd like to learn more about some of the psychological theories used, feel free to read more about it here under Theories for the Unit. So, Unit 1, Lesson 1 opens up with Pavlov's theories of behaviorism. Thorndike is also used in this lesson. So this lesson is about learning French introductions and introducing French geography. So it's very much a lesson for beginning students who have never had French before ever in their lives. So behaviorism is going to be a very strong concept to help them learn this new language, and also to teach them classroom management skills. So, or to manage their behavior in the classroom. So Pavlov developed critical conditioning in which a person or animal learns to associate a neutral stimulus with a meaningful stimulus, gradually responding to the neutral stimulus in the same way as the meaningful one. So the strategy that I used in this lesson is the use of a tambourine. Any instrument or any sound-making item can be used, but the behaviorist aspect of this is that students are learning to associate the sound of the tambourine with the behavior of sitting down in their desks quietly. The reward that I give my students is just individualized recognition, which just reinforces the behavior, and this is a behavior that I will ask of my students and reinforce throughout the semester. In this case, in Lesson 1, I am specifically outlining what I expect of the students when they hear the sound of the tambourine. And over the course of the year, that will become less and less necessary. They will learn to associate the sound of the tambourine with the classroom command of sitting down. And so we have a tambourine to remember, the tambourine. Next in Lesson 1 is Bruner's theory of specific transfer of training. So he says learning in school undoubtedly creates skills of a kind that transfer to activities encountered later, either in school or after. So the strategy that I'm using here is using previous knowledge to teach French greetings. For example, everybody knows that if you wave your hand, that is, well, at least in the United States, that is a form of greeting. So when I'm saying bonjour to my students, I will be also waving my hand, getting them to engage in previous knowledge, and to help them realize what I'm telling them. There will be other examples of that throughout this lesson as well, including in the introductory conversation. And so we have bonjour. Next is Lesson 2. In this lesson, we're just reviewing the introductions that we learned in the previous day, and we're also talking about the masculine and feminine articles, and then we're using those articles with school supplies vocabulary. So this theory that we're using in this particular lesson is Piaget, maybe, who talks about cognitive development. So he says it is recommended that teachers use a wide variety of concrete experiences to help the child learn. So using the use of manipulatives, working in groups to get experience, seeing from another's perspective, field trips, etc. So I'm using multiple strategies in this case. I'm teaching the material in multiple ways. So one way is, well, I'm playing several games with them. So one of them is called Where is the Pencil? So I say something like Où est le stylo? And I look around and find somebody who's who's lifting up their pencil because I've instructed them to lift the object that you believe I'm asking for. So once somebody lifts up their pencil, or and I can encourage them to do this in multiple ways as well, then I will give them praise and call attention to them until everyone lifts up their pencil. So they're seeing the object, they're hearing the word multiple times. We're also playing Pictionary during this lesson, so that's talking about, so we're engaging their visual senses. And then for the next day, we will be reviewing the material by playing a memory game where students have to remember the objects that are covered up on a board. And we have our pencil, Où est le stylo? Okay, so lesson 5. In lesson 5, students are learning to construct sentences. We're using Willingham's idea of metacognitive development. So Willingham says, critical thinking, as well as scientific thinking and other domain-based thinking, is not a skill. It is not a set of critical thinking skills that can be acquired and deployed regardless of context. Second, there are metacognitive strategies that, once learned, make critical thinking more likely. Third, the ability to think critically, to actually do what the metacognitive strategies call for, depends on domain knowledge and practice. So we're going to practice our domain knowledge. We're going to practice the idea of metacognitive thinking by asking ourselves questions and working through the process of creating sentences through questions. So that's going to be something that we talk about throughout the class and in the next lesson as well. That's going to be something that they take home for homework. And so just learning to ask themselves questions like, is this article masculine or feminine? What is the subject of the sentence? These sorts of questions, which are going to help them later on the assessment. And it's going to ease the transition between thinking in English and beginning to think in French. Next, we have we continue with lesson 6. So we're using Gardner's ideas about multiple intelligences. Gardner says, once the decision has been made to dedicate time to particular items, it then becomes possible to approach those topics or notions in a variety of ways. Not necessarily 7 ways, but in a number of ways that prove pedagogically appropriate for the topic at hand. So Gardner talks about there not only being one single intelligence, but rather a set of intelligence such as visual and spatial intelligence, along with many others. So in order to engage in multiple intelligences, we're doing several activities throughout the day, but the one that I wanted to highlight is that we are making a color wheel as a class. That's going to be during the guided practice time. I will be in the front of the class instructing in French which colors to mix together at what time. After the whole class makes a color wheel in groups, they're going to label the color wheel only in French. So that's engaging their linguistic intelligence as well as their visual and kinetic. And then continuing with lesson 6, we're talking about James now. James has a general psychological theory about memory. James says, for a state of mind to survive in memory, it must have endured for a certain length of time. In other words, it must be a substantive state. Prepositional and conjunctive states of mind are not remembered as independent facts. Our consciousness of these transitive states is shut up in their own moment. So with this, this is with this idea, I'm going to be assigning homework to review the metacognitive process. So this is taking the things that we're learning in class and helping them transfer those outside of the classroom. So now they have a second time that they're seeing that. And in the next week, we're going to continue to see the exact same processes until eventually they appear on the assessment. And that's going to be how I really make sure that the students are prepared for the assessment. They're not going to be cramming every single thing that we see throughout the unit is very much going to be something that the students have seen multiple times. And if you'd like to see the assessment and see how it builds on the unit plan, that is also available on the website. And so we have our little brain. The final lesson is lesson 9. It's the final lesson before the assessment. So students are using this time to play review games, and we're using Bandura's social cognitive theory. Bandura broke this process down into 4 processes, including attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. So in this lesson, we are playing review day games, and we're making it a competition. The reward for these games are 2 extra points on the test. So that is the overview for the unit 1 for French 1.